And this month's challenge is the 30-day home cooking whole foods challenge. So I just want to encourage you, if you're doing this challenge, just to continue with it. Continue to experiment with your food. The way I see it, there's kind of two ways that you can, two different types of cooks. There's kind of the intuitive cook that likes to experiment and try new things and is in touch with certain flavors and what goes together and with what they like and what their family likes, and that works for them. And then there are others who select recipes and they stick to those recipes. And I think you should try a bit of both, because I know for me personally, like as a young mother, when I started my family, I made a few dishes that I didn't like, that the family didn't like, and I began to label myself early on as a bad cook. I labeled myself as a person who didn't even like to cook. And it was because I had accepted those failures and labeled myself as a bad cook and just kind of moved on from there and didn't do a lot of cooking or experimenting or even trying. I just kind of gave up early. So my message is, if you make a recipe and it's a stinker and it turns out really bad and you don't like it and your family doesn't like it, don't label yourself a bad cook and don't give up on whole foods. Keep trying. And if experimentation isn't for you, then pick out some recipes and stick to them closely. And in time, I guarantee you, in time you will become, you'll probably develop a love for cooking if you don't have one already. And in time, you will become a very good cook. It's like anything in life. It takes practice. Some people have a natural knack for it, just like anything, and others have to work at it a little bit. So when it comes to home cooking, keep at it, do it every day, experiment a little bit, follow recipes, do a little bit of both, but incorporate in those whole foods as much as possible. And stay away from the processed stuff and try to minimize or eliminate animal foods as much as possible. If you're trying to improve your health, if you're trying to prevent disease, or if you're trying to lose weight, this is key. Animal foods and junk foods. Crowd those out and crowd in the plants. So today's topic, what's it like to be skinny? I'm excited to do this topic, but I'm also a little bit hesitant because I don't want to send the wrong message. I certainly don't want to make anyone feel bad. But I want to share some of my experiences on what it's been like losing weight and being thin. Just some of the things I've noticed, some of the things that I enjoy. And then I have a couple of other things I want to touch down on as well. But so let's begin. So I will be vegan in July. It will be 3 years, excuse me. And the last time I went to a doctor before I went on a plant-based diet, I weighed in at 195 pounds at the doctor's office. And I was in denial about this for quite some time because, I'd weighed myself on other scales and they didn't say I weighed 195 pounds. So, but yeah, 195 pounds. And the picture in the thumbnail, the before picture, I believe that was taken at my daughter's graduation. Yes. So that was about a month before I went plant-based. So that would have been about my heaviest weight right there. So about 195 pounds. I now weigh about 150 pounds. So I've lost around 45 pounds, depending on which scale I use. But I can remember wondering what's it like to be skinny. I would look at someone that's thin and just how confident they seemed and how comfortable they seemed in their clothes and in their body and their way they held themselves, and just wondering what's that like, because and I've been thin before. I was thin most of my childhood and my youthful days. It was once when I got older, I started to just kind of put on a little more weight. And then when I got married in 2011, I began to put on a lot of weight. I put on 30 pounds in 3 years is my estimation. But yeah, I would wonder what's it like to be thin? I'd gotten so far away from it that I'd forgotten what that's like. And I in my mind felt like I was never going to be thin again. I just resolved to that. So here's what it's like. I've made some notes, some things I've noticed that I really enjoy. The first one is I just feel lighter, obviously because I am lighter. But there's definitely, even in the first month of going plant-based, I lost 8 pounds in that first month. And I felt lighter. I had a spring in my step, and my clothes felt looser, and I weighed a little bit less, so I was lighter. But I don't know, it's hard to describe, but definitely now I just don't feel weighed down, and I'm not carrying around extra 45 pounds, so that would make sense. But definitely just that feeling of, well, anyway, I'll move on. It's hard to explain. I feel lighter, but it's a wonderful feeling. You feel more comfortable in your clothes. And speaking of clothes, getting dressed, that's the other thing I've noticed. Since I've lost the weight, I used to put on, pantyhose every day, and the slenderizers and the minimizers and the lifters and the back flatteners and all of that stuff before I even got dressed. So it was quite a chore in the morning getting dressed, and literally getting dressed each morning was so stressful, and it was my least favorite part of the day. I would sit there in front of my closet and just stare at it and think, oh, I gotta get dressed. Maybe some of you can relate with that. But I hated getting dressed. And then I would put on my clothes and I would look in the mirror and go, nope, that's not going to work. And I'd go back and change. And for me, I would wear a lot of skirts, and I used to be very fashionable, because I had decided if I'm going to be overweight, I'm still going to look good. And so that it came down to, my clothing and my accessories to pull myself together and present myself. But I would wear a lot of skirts with tight belts to show, my waist, with the flared skirt, and a lot of accessories. Just to kind of distract from other areas. So it was a lot of work. I didn't enjoy it, and it was very constricting. There were times where I oftentimes just felt like my breath was being, constricted, because everything was so tight, all the minimizers. I wear the high-waisted pantyhose that came up to my chest. And then just the constriction around my abdomen as well, just crunching in all those organs. It's very uncomfortable. So now, if you watch my channel, you know that I've kind of created some uniforms for myself. I just wear scrubs. I have 2 sets of scrubs, and I rotate through those. During the week, I wear, different t-shirts, and then on the weekend, I have some nicer clothes for church or events or outings or whatever. But that's pretty much it for my wardrobe. I've minimized it down by maybe 75, 80%. I've gotten rid of a lot of clothes. So that's nice. It makes getting dressed just easy and enjoyable, and wearing clothes just comfortable, and it's just a no-brainer. I just don't even really think about my clothes anymore. And then shopping as well. Shopping used to be very stressful for me, and now when I do go shopping, I find I just grab things off the rack and I just buy them. I just take them home and try them when I'm home. And there was a time where I didn't even know that was a thing. People would just buy clothes and not try them on in the dressing room. So that makes shopping a lot easier. But probably one of my favorite things about the weight loss is just the ability for my body to function. So some examples would be, I can remember I was to the point where just bending over to pick up a piece of lint or a Kleenex off the ground was I would grunt. I just reach and stretch and grunt. And it was hard to do something simple like that. Standing up from a chair, climbing upstairs, sleeping at night was always, I never had deep, uninterrupted sleep, because I was, stiff and achy, and that would wake me up. And, getting down on the floor and getting back up again. Some of you are probably thinking, what's the matter with this woman? But I know there are those of you out there that can relate to these things. As you get heavier, you get less active. As you get less active, you get more sedentary. And as you get more sedentary, you become weaker, you become less flexible. And so just your body's ability to function, on a muscular level, just to do basic things, gets harder and harder and harder. And so what I've noticed is all of those things are no longer an issue. And in fact, I notice those things just every time I bend over to pick something up on the ground. I am just aware of how easy it is. When I squat down, I am aware of how much stronger my legs are, how much lighter I am, how much easier, all of those things. Going up a flight of stairs isn't grudge. It's skip, skip, skip. It's just different. It's so different. And it's so much better. It's just so much better. And, oftentimes I find myself in those situations where I'm just aware of how much better it is. And I think back on how long it took me to get to this point. I mean, I've been, struggled with health issues really as long as I can remember, but really the weight I've only struggled with, in my later adult years. And, just tried calorie restricting and portion controlling and different diets like Atkins and paleo, and trying these different things that never did anything. I just continued to gain weight. And those diets were hard. I mean, they were impossible. I couldn't stick to them. And then I go on a plant-based vegan diet of all things. I mean, you would think that would be like the most extreme diet out there. And it ended up being the most enjoyable. I didn't feel like I was really giving anything up. In the beginning, yes, definitely, because I was still, there are a lot of factors that factor into that in the beginning. But now it's just the way I eat. I eat till satisfaction all the time. I don't restrict my calories, and I continue to maintain this weight loss. I think this is probably about where I'll stay. I may lose a little bit more weight. I definitely have it to lose. I mean, I'm not skinny. I've got flab, and I've got a belly, and I've got cellulite, and all of those things, but I'm just so happy with where I'm at. I mean, definitely, if this is as good as it gets, I am okay with that because of all of these things I've just mentioned, and because of the healing. Obviously, that's the best part, and because I feel lighter, and because I can function and I can move. And these bodies are meant to move. I know I say that a lot, but these bodies are meant to move. And so, if you're in a place where you're overweight, or especially if you're obese, it's going to make it so much harder to do this stuff, to function and to move. I mean, yeah, you can move, but to what degree? I mean, these bodies are meant to walk and to run and to jump and to climb and to push and to pull. And, we have arms and legs and butts and backs and abs and all these muscles. We are meant to move, and we're meant to be healthy. And so I would even go as far as to say we're meant to be lean. We're meant to be skinny. And I know that will offend some people, because there's this movement right now to be more accepting of all sizes, and to be accepting of people who are overweight, people who are obese. And in fact, there are a couple people here on YouTube that have YouTube channels. They're young women. I would say there's one in particular. I'm not going to mention her name, but she's probably maybe 22, and she's very obese, and she's got millions of followers here on YouTube. She's very popular. Young, impressionable women, and her message is, to accept that big is beautiful. And had I heard that, please stick with me. Had I heard that, 5 years ago, I would have been like, that's great. That is a positive, empowering message. More power to you. Here's the thing with that, though. There's a couple of things. One is, she and others like her are promoting this message to accept big, that it's beautiful, and that it's healthy. And so I would challenge that, because I know that she's young and she claims to be healthy. But the thing you have to remember is, when it comes to being overweight, particularly obesity, is though that goes hand in hand with much of our chronic disease. They go hand in hand. So being overweight, being obese is oftentimes, almost always, a contraindication or a risk factor for chronic illness. So take heart disease, for example, our country's #1 killer. Over 500,000 people and climbing die every year of heart attack. Obesity, risk factor. Same thing with diabetes, same thing with cancer. And yes, people get cancer who are thin, and yes, people who get diabetes are thin. But in general, the overwhelming majority of those people, what do they have in common? They're overweight, they're obese. Why? Because they're eating the wrong foods. Those foods are making them overweight. They're not eating too much food. They might be eating too much food. They might be eating a lot of food, but they're eating the wrong foods. And when we eat the wrong foods, animal foods, junk foods, and we're, barely eating any plant foods, when we eat those foods, when those comprise the majority of our diet, we get overweight, and then our health begins to deteriorate in many, many ways. Many ways. The food begins to, compromise our health. And so I believe that this message, that big is beautiful, let's accept people, let's accept ourselves if we're big, just the way we are. And this has nothing to do with self-love and acceptance, to where you're at. But when when we say, you know, that big is beautiful and I'm not going to do anything for my health and I'm going to continue to eat crap. And that's another thing, you know, this young woman, she does mukbangs like I do on her channel, only she eats an entire bucket of KFC. Or she'll eat, you know, piles of greasy cheeseburgers, and she'll send this message, you know, go ahead and eat whatever you want because big is beautiful. And we need to show the world that we are beautiful and sexy and healthy too. And people need to change their perception of that. That's her message. And so I would offer a contradicting message to that. And that is that we are meant to be lean because these bodies are meant to move. And it's so much harder to move when we're carrying all that extra weight. And what happens when we carry all that extra weight? We do become more sedentary because it's so much more difficult to function and to do things. So we become less active. And you all know what happens when you become less active. You know, you put on weight even easier, so you get even bigger. And then not even to mention, you know, the health complications that come along with that. I just want to finish this up with saying, if you are overweight and you have decided that you're always going to be overweight, that's just it. I had a woman tell me that not that long ago. She said, I'm overweight, my mom's overweight, all of her sisters are overweight, my sisters are overweight, I'm always going to be overweight. That's that. And she's an obese woman. And she had even gone on a diet, a very calorie restrictive diet, and lost all the weight. And then she put it all back on because, you know, the diet was wrong. She was on the wrong diet. And so I think a lot of people do this. They come to a point in their life where they've tried and they've failed when it comes to weight loss. They continue to put the weight on. They don't want to give up their good foods. And so they just decide, I'm just going to accept myself just the way I am. And I'm going to love myself. And that's it. I'm never going to be a thin person. And I would challenge that. While yes, there are some people who have to, you know, maybe, you know, there is a genetic factor that makes it a little bit more difficult. Maybe their health has gotten to the point where, you know, it's going to be a lot more difficult to heal and to lose weight. You know, you can really play a number on your metabolism with a lot of these diets, drinking a lot of, you know, coffee and caffeinated beverages to mess with your adrenal system, mess with your hormones, can make it very difficult to lose weight, unfortunately. And so, yes, some people have a more of a challenge when it comes to weight loss, but don't let that stop you from going on a plant-based diet, because I believe that everyone will come to a more leaner, natural weight on a plant-based diet in time. It might take more time for some than others, but in time, I believe that everyone will come to a leaner, more natural weight, because that's what your body is meant to be. We're meant to be lean. You don't look in the animal kingdom and see animals who are overweight and obese, except in one place, and that's in domesticated animals. That's in your cats and your dogs that live in the home, and they're eating the same food that you're eating, kind of the standard American diet. And so, you know, just like you don't see, you know, obese animals, you shouldn't see obese human beings either, but you do, because we're eating the wrong food. So I would encourage you to continue with your home cooking, continue to crowd in the plants and crowd out the animal foods and the junk foods. There's really, you know, kind of two ways of looking at starting a plant-based diet. You can jump in wholeheartedly and just clean out your pantry, clean out your refrigerator, and go 100% plant-based, which is what I did, and it's what I actually recommend. But if you feel like you just can't do that, then start to, you know, experiment and crowd in, you know, experiment with some plant-based dishes so that you can see that they're good, so that you can see that they're tasty, so that you can see that you're not gonna miss out on anything. And I want to finish with this. If this, you know, being on this plant-based diet, it has been so enjoyable. Not only has the food been, you know, delicious, but, you know, I've got to experience, you know, losing weight as a side bonus to the healing that I experience. But I got to enjoy wonderful, delicious food. That's, you know, if I could convince you of anything, that would be it, that the food is delicious. It may take you a little bit of time to get there, to understand that and to experience it, because our palates can get very, what's the word? I don't know, just gummed up with all the fat and, you know, the oil and the sugar and the salt and the chemicals that we eat in our foods. And so there really is this cleansing that has to take place for you to start to appreciate and enjoy the natural flavors in foods. But once you get there, you will never feel like you're on a diet. You will just love and enjoy the food you eat every single day, and you will love being able to eat and not have that stigma of, oh, I feel guilty because I ate too much, or oh, I better not eat anymore because I'm trying to lose weight. That all just goes away if you're sticking to whole foods. Like if 90% of your diet is whole plant foods, so foods that are as close to their natural state as possible. I mean, yeah, you can cook your food and chop your food and put it in a food processor. It still makes it, a whole food. It's just a little processed, but stick to those whole plant foods as much as possible, and that's where you're going to see the success. All right, so I hope you have an awesome day, and thank you for watching.